Welcome back to another crochet tutorial with Cozy Rosie UK, and today I'm sharing with you how to crochet your very own Big Bauble Christmas pillow. Before we get started, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and of course the notification bell so you never miss out on all of my crochet patterns or tutorials again. This video is part of my Easy Christmas Patterns playlist, and you can find the details of that full playlist down in the description box below. And there are lots of patterns for you to get your teeth into or your hook so that you can stitch up your very own Christmas. So the materials that you're going to need to make your very own Big Bauble pillow cover is about 150 meters per colour, as in the red and the white, because I'm using for this for colour A and C, and the white I'm using for B and D. I'm going to work all four colours in the same round to create that beautiful spiral effect. If you want to, you can grab some stitch markers so you can mark the start of each of your round, and you can use those stitch markers to secure your loops if you want to as well. For the top of my bauble, I had to raid my stash. This is a bit of a stash buster, this pattern for me. And yes, it is not the same brand because, as I said, this is left over from last Christmas, and this was just in my stash. I don't even know why I have this colour, but I'm glad that I did because it's kind of golden, which I really like. Now this is shade number 323. Again, it's a chunky / bulky weight, so they're all size 5 in their yarn weights. So you can use this pattern with any size 5 yarn. You're only going to need about 30 meters of your yellow colour or your gold colour, so 150 per colour. I'm actually going to use 4 different balls to work this up so that I can attach each ball, and then I've got 30 meters at least in this scrap that's left here to make my bauble top. And we are going to stuff the top of our bauble because it's not part of our cushion. So you're going to need some fibre fill, polyfill. I'm using Toy Safe fibre fill because I always do, just in case. Also means that if you're buying your cushion pad, that helps with the non-flammable elements, and so does the Toy Safe fibre fill as well. Now I'm going to be using a 6mm crochet hook, which corresponds with this size 5 yarn, and you're going to need a chunky darning needle. This is a little bit excessive, but it does the job. So you'll have this little needle on hand as well. So gather your materials and let's get started. So with our slip knot on our hook, we're going to start by making a chain of 4. So we just yarn over, pull through 1, 2, 3 and 4. We're then going to slip stitch into the first chain that we made, just by inserting our hook underneath the top loop, yarn over, pull through and straight through the loop on our hook, which creates a ring. It's important to note that we're going to go for the middle hole, not the one we've just made with our slip knot. We're then going to make a chain of 1 before working into the center of our ring here by making 1 single crochet. So we just insert, yarn over to bring our loop back up, yarn over, pull through 2. You'll notice I'm also working over my end here. We're then going to yarn over to work a US half double crochet, and we're going to make a further 2 half double crochets into the middle as well. So that's number 1, yarn over again, straight back into the middle for number 2. Now, unlike many other patterns out there, we are going to work all 4 colours in the same round. So I'm just going to bring up my loop and take my hook out and drop my working yarn, but I'm going to make sure that I continue to work over my tail as we add in the next colour. So colour B for me is white. So I'm going to insert my hook through the middle, make sure that my working yarn is at the back, put my tail over the back of my hook and bring it through, and then chain 1. Make sure that my tail is at the back, and we're working the same again in this colour. So we're inserting, yarn over to bring a loop up, yarn over, pull through 2 for our single crochet. You can bring it around if you start running out of space. We're then going to work 3 half double crochets in the same colour. I'm still working over my tails. That's 1, 2, and 3. I'm going to pull that around and squish those up a bit, because we've got a lot more to work in here. I'm going to put my working yarn out of the way and bring up a loop. So those loops are there and the working yarn is all to one side and my tails are at the other. Insert my hook ready for colour C, and I'm alternating them, so I'm going back to red, bring that back through, yarn over for our chain 1, bring my tail out. I've got all 3 tails ready to work our single crochet and then 3 half double crochets. So that's 1, make sure my ends are still there. Where's that other one gone? There, 1, 2, pull them around if you need to more space, and 3. So now we have 3 colours, all with the same number of stitches. Getting pretty violent with my putting these stitches around now. And once again, put the working yarn to the back, bring up a loop, and I've just got my tails here. I'm going to insert my hook for the final colour, which for me is colour D, is white. Again, just placing my end over, bringing it through, find my working yarn, yarn over for my chain 1. Make sure I've got all my ends together. Where's my new end? There. And we're working by inserting to work our single crochet, and we're yarning over for 3 half double crochets. So that's 1, oh, tails everywhere, yarn over for number 2, and yarn over for number 3. I'm going to bring up that loop because that ends round 1. So if I hold my ends out of the way, you can see we have 1, 2, 3, 4 loops. Here are my tails. If I pull on the right tail, which I think is the shortest one here, it will close the middle. And I can use the remainder of these tails to tighten the center. Let's pull them one at a time to make sure they're nice and tight. Be quite violent because it's nice chunky weight yarn, and that closes the center. Rather than turning, we're working in a continuous spiral, so I'm just rotating, ready to go back to the first color that we had and placing that back on the loop. We're working into the top of the previous round in color B. So at the end of round 1, you're going to have 4 stitches in each color. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, so hard to see in white, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and another 4 there. So we're going to work around for round 2. We're starting with color A, and because we're not joining the colors, we're working in a continuous round. We simply get ready to insert our hook into the first stitch in the next color. So we yarn over, ready to work into that first stitch. So there's 1, 2, 3, we're in stitch number 4, and we're working 2 half double crochets into this first stitch. So that's 1, and reinsert for number 2. Then we work 1 half double crochet into the next, and then we're going to work 2 half double crochets into the next stitch. 1, yarn over again and reinsert for the second. We're going to leave this loop or this stitch unworked and just bring up that loop ready to continue. and you can see that the colour is just going to spiral on top of each other. So we rotate to add back on the next colour. Ready to insert into that first stitch. There we are, where we're working 2 half double crochets, so that's 1 and 2. We work 1 half double crochet into the next, so that's 1, and then we work 2 half double crochets into the next. You can bring up your loop, and if you find that you're getting a little bit tangled, just flip it over and you'll be untangled. It's like magic. I don't need to do mine just yet. We're going to repeat these stitches in colour C and D to complete the round. So we just pop the next colour on to our hook before working 2 half double crochets into the first, 1 half double crochet followed by 2 half double crochets. Finding that first stitch can be a little bit tricky so we're working 2 half double crochets into that first stitch, so that's 1 and 2, 1 half double crochet into the next, and then 2 half double crochets into the stitch before the next colour loop, and bring my loop up, ready to pick up the next colour. So this is the final time we're going to do it, and as you can see, the start of our row has moved. So it's important that you keep an eye on these stitch counts that you're working, just so you don't get yourself confused, or you can place a stitch marker into that first stitch of the round if you want to. So we're yarning over and working 2 half double crochets into the first, 1 half double crochet into the next, followed by 2 half double crochets into the last. We can then bring up our loop, and that's the end of round 2. It looks almost square, but it will go round in the next round. Now, as you can see, I'm leaving these stitches unworked because that way I know where I am. And colour A for me was red, so A, B, C, D. And at the moment, so at the end of round 2, you should have 5 stitches that you've worked in each colour. So you've got those 2 half double crochets, 1 half double crochet, 2 half double crochets, and that's the same for each around. I'm going to go back to colour A, which for me was this red colour. And we start by working 2 half double crochets into the first stitch. We are then going to work 1 half double crochet into each of the next 3 stitches, 2 and 3, which brings us to the stitch before our loop, where we work 2 half double crochets. So that's 1 and 2. Bring that loop up, and we can change to the next colour, where we repeat that again, working 2 half double crochets into that next stitch. We work 1 half double crochet into each of the next 3, 2 and 3, and then into the stitch before our loop we work 2 half double crochets. That's 1 and 2. Pull that loop up, and then we can pop the next loop onto our hook, and we just repeat that with the last 2 colours. I promise you this will turn into a circle. I know it doesn't feel like it, but it really does. So for this round we've made 7 half double crochets. So we make 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Remember, you left 1 unworked, so we count from there. And that should be the same for each colour around. So yes, it's square at the moment-ish, but I promise you it will continue to go around. So for rounds 4 through to 15, we're going to be repeating round 3, working 2 half double crochets into the first stitch, and then the number between the increases will increase by 2. So last round we had 3 in between the increases. So this round we're going to have 5. So we're working 2 half double crochets, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 2 half double crochets, and we leave this stitch unworked. For the following round, that number would increase in between, so we would have 7 stitches in between. So we work 2 half double crochets into the first stitch, and then 1 half double crochet into each stitch around. That's 2, 3, 4 and 5 for this round, and then in the stitch before our colour change we work 2 half double crochets again. There is a pattern where your increases are placed. So here we have 2 increases, and then they start to shift around. So you'll have 2 increases and then they move across one. So it'll be up and across, all the way up and around this cushion. And the most important thing to do is to track that one colour that isn't quite at the start of the round. So just remember the number of stitches you're working in between. So we're doing 5 in this round. Next round will be 7, 9, etc. It will increase. The finished spiral is quite striking, and I've finished this panel completely. I'm just working on my second one with you now. And I wanted to show you what I meant about the increases stepping around. So we have our increases and they move around just a little bit with each round. So if you get lost, look at where your increases are. You've got 2 increases next to each other, but they move ever so slightly around. I've lost them now. Wow. Like a magic eye picture, isn't it? So 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, and they keep coming around, and that's what helps keep this a circle and not any other shape. My goodness, it's certainly an eye picture. So continue around repeating that, working in each of your colours, and the stitches in between will increase by 2 for each round. And we're looking for a total of 31 half double crochets at the end of round 15. And then I'm going to meet you for our last 2 rounds where we circle off our spiral, if that makes sense. So continue to repeat that, and I will meet you for the next part of our pattern. Once you have worked rounds 4 all the way to rounds 15, you're going to be looking a little bit like this. No, it is not a perfect circle, and I had to flatten it quite a bit to get it to lay flat. That is all to be expected. The final part to do on each of the cushion panels is to circle off and stop increasing for the next 2 rounds. That's going to help us curve around our cushion pad, and it will allow this to lay flatter against your cushion pad as well. Much like all the other rounds, we're going to work each of the colours in this round, and we're going to pick up colour A and find the right thing to pull. From here, we're changing our stitch, and we're going to be working 1 US single crochet into each stitch around. We're not increasing, we're just working 1 US single into each stitch. We're going to be working all the way around to the final stitch before our colour loop, just as we've been doing in each of these rounds. It's increased quite a lot since we reached here, and you'll be working at 31 single crochets to get to that final, well, the stitch before your loop. So continue around. I'll meet you ready for the first colour change. Oops. And 31. So once you've worked 1 single crochet from your final increase, which is where we started here, all the way around to your next colour change loop, we're not going to fasten off because we have 1 more round to do after this. So we're going to pop on our next colour and repeat that for B, C and D, and we're working 1 US single crochet into each stitch around to your next colour change loop, which is 31 single crochets. There's no increasing on this round, and that will help to curve your, already you can start to see it happening, curve the cushion panel around the cushion pad. So work A, B and C and D, and I'll meet you back for round 17 once you've worked all 4 loops, working 31 single crochets, and I'll meet you for our final round. So at the end of round 16, you can see that it's trying to curl up into itself. Don't worry, it's supposed to be. And you'll notice that we have worked all the way around, covering all of those half double crochets except that last one, which we're going to work in round 17. So for round 17, we're working 1 single crochet, a US single crochet, into each of the next 30 stitches, and we leave the remaining single crochet unworked. And that brings us all the way back to our next colour change loop for A, B and C. And then of course D we have to count. And then the important thing to remember is if you're working on your first panel, once you've completed round 17, you're going to fasten off your colours and weave those ends in. And then for your second panel, we're going to leave all the colours attached because we're going to use that second panel to join to the first one. And that means that we can continue the spiral effect by changing colours as we join the 2 panels together. It just gives it a really nice finish. So continue for round 17, working 1 single crochet into each of the next 30 stitches, and I will meet you once you've worked both your panels. You've got 1 panel with your ends woven in, and your second panel will have your colours still attached, and then I will meet you to join them. So once we have finished all the way around working those 31 single crochets, and we've got 2 panels all together. One has everything all weaved in nice and neatly. The one that has the ends woven in becomes our back panel of our cushion, and we need to make sure that we have the right sides of our cushion both facing out. Now the way that we're going to line these panels up so that we can continue our spiral looking pattern is to make sure that you have your tails would have been out the back, and we're going to line them up so we have the matching colours next to each other. So this is because this is the right side, this is where you would have ended. So for me, this is where I've woven my colour in, and this is the end of my colour A, and I'm just matching it up so that those 2 stitches match, and it should be that when you have your next colour change, it's going to match up perfectly. So we're going to join over in my colour B is going to be joined with colour A, and then when we rotate, we're going to change to our white colour to join over this red section, and we're going to continue that around. So the first thing to do is to make sure that you have right side facing out, or they call it wrong side together, so that you have both the wrong sides together, and then line up your colour changes so that we have our next stitch in white against our first stitch in white, it looks like, from the back. Now the join that I'm recommending for this cushion is the flat slip stitch seam. It is entirely optional if you want to use this join. It is one of my favourites, and it doesn't create a bump. You don't then have a wrong side and a right side of your cushion. So for me, it really is beautiful, but it can feel a little bit tricky and a little bit fiddly. So the way that I begin is with my panels on either side of myself. So I have my back panel and my front panel, as in the front panel where the yarn is. And I'm going to start by inserting my hook through the back loop of my front panel, and just drop the yarn behind. It's really important that the yarn is on the back of your project. Where I've woven in, I've made this look a bit messy. So I'm going to grab what would have been the back loop of that first stitch, and I'm inserting my hook from the front of the pattern, or the front of the panel, out to the back. So it looks like if my cushion was together, it would be on the inside of my cushion. We simply then yarn over I'm going to pull down a bit and pull through all 3 loops on my hook. It might be a bit fiddly. And that creates our slip stitch. We're then going to insert our hook into the front panel through the back loop, and then we're going to go through the next stitch from the right side out to the wrong side on the back panel. Then we yarn over and we're pulling through all 3 loops again to create that next slip stitch. See if I can zoom in a bit so you can see a bit better. So we're going in through the back loop, keeping the yarn at the back, finding that next loop that's not been worked on the other panel, and I'm trying to pick up what would be the front loop looking at us, inserting my hook, making sure the yarn's at the back, yarn over, and I'm going to pull through all 3 loops, and that creates our slip stitch seam. Now it's not very obvious yet, but it's going to be completely flat, and because we're continuing with this colour, it looks more seamless than if we were to do a single crochet join. That's annoying. Oh well, can't have everything perfect. And we're just going to continue this around, working through that back loop of the next stitch and the front loop, which is the one closest to us here. Yarn over, pull down to pull through all 3 loops. This isn't a tight slip stitch join, we're just making sure that everything is joined. A little bit tricky to get that other loop, and then just pull through all 3 without catching anything, and then continue around. Now obviously as we get further around this cushion, we're going to end up having to hold the panels together, which is actually going to be probably a little bit easier. Just got to keep an eye on where your yarn is then, and make sure that almost that your working yarn is on the inside of your cushion. There we go. You can see it a little bit more about how it becomes a flat seam, and then when our cushion is folded, we haven't got a bump, we don't have a wrong side or a right side, they look the same, so it just gives us a very neat finish. So continue around doing your slip stitch join. Your alternative, if you don't want to do this slip stitch join, would be just to work through the loops of each stitch on both panels and work a standard single crochet. It certainly is quicker, but I will do a few more and show you why it's not my preferred. Because it looks perfectly good, these last few stitches. Looks lovely from this side, but on the other side it stands proud. I mean, it's quite nice, but I just like it to look the same on both sides, whereas with our slip stitch they are much more similar. So it's entirely up to you whether you work your standard US single crochet join or you want to do this flat seam that I'm doing for my cushion. It is entirely your choice, but continue around till you reach your next colour loop, working through both panels, and I will meet you for our colour change. So I've just reached my colour change at the top here, and I wanted to show you how my join is looking. It literally looks almost seamless by using that flat slip stitch seam, and I really want to show it off because I really do love this join. It's one of my absolute favourites, and obviously you can understand that once you've got your cushion in there, it's going to lay completely flat on the top and look pretty much seamless. So we have of course reached our colour loop change. Now we need to work into this last stitch, whereas we would normally kind of skip over it. I'm going to work into it first. So I'm inserting my hook, just making sure I've got a nice long loop, and I've made a boo-boo and I'm already into my red. So we're just going to ignore that for a moment and pick up my first back loop of my red. So just to show you, no, it's just a mistake I've made. I've miscounted, but I'm not going to undo everything just for the sake of one stitch. Just going to pull through, which is a little bit tricky when you're using all the same colour. There we go. So this colour is completely done. So as I would normally, I'm just going to bring up a loop and leave it out of the way so that we can fasten it off later. And I'm picking up my next colour, and this time we're working through our red stitches. We've already worked into that last loop, and it's up to you if you work into it now or if you come back to it. I'm going into the next colour, and I'm just going to I'm not putting my end on the inside of my cushion. Sorry, it's a bit hard to show you. I'm just moving it out of the way from that last stitch that we made. We need to fasten off. because we need to make sure we work into that stitch that's just being covered by that loop. So I'm just going to move it out of the way, and then I'm ready to insert through the back loop of this stitch. I've got my white on the hook going through the back loop or the front loop of the next stitch, ready to pull through all 3 loops. It's a bit awkward to do this on camera, I always say this, but there are some things that are definitely more tricky on camera than off. So then we can just carry on doing our flat slip stitch join in our new colour. It is fiddly, I appreciate that, but I really do believe it's worth the effort to get what looks like almost a seamless join in your cushion. As I said, if you want to carry on working your US single crochet, you are more than welcome to. And if, like me, you've mixed up on your counting, don't worry, just keep going. No one's going to notice one stitch here or there. So continue around, working all of the loops, remembering to work that loop just before your colour change. And I'm going to meet you once you've worked all the way back around to colour, well, to when you've got one colour left, because obviously at some point we're going to have to insert our cushion pad, and I'm going to insert mine when I've reached back around to my last colour and the last section to join. So work all the way around to your last colour change, and I'll meet you there so we can insert our cushion pads and work our last few joins, and I'll see you there. So I've reached my final colour change and I've worked. It looks so messy, doesn't it? I've got my big red loop, got my white loop here. I'm just going to insert my cushion pad before I proceed onto the next section. I'm taking a good few moments here to make sure that it's on properly, because I am sealing my cushion pad up. Mine's machine washable, so I can chuck the whole thing into the machine if needed. So I just want to make sure that it's in. Look at that beautiful join. Isn't it stunning? Don't you love that flat slip stitch seam? I'm just making sure that it's in as evenly as it can be. And look how good that looks. Once you're happy with your cushion positioning, you can continue on to work around. Where's mine gone? You can then pick up your final colour, and this is where it gets a little bit tricky because you've got to keep your cushion out of the way as you make those last few joins with your last colour. So continue around working your last colour. I really can't do this on camera. And I'll meet you for the final fastening off, ready to weave in our final ends. And then all that's left to do is to make the top of our bauble in our yellow colour and sew that on with a little bit of stuffing inside. I'll see you in a few once you've done this last section. Well, that last one was more than a little bit tricky, but we got it done and my cushion is all sealed up. All that's left to deal with is our ends. And for our ends, so this is, I'm back to colour A here, and we're simply going to cut our yarn, obviously leaving a nice long tail for us to weave in, and pull it back out, and then it creates a lovely knot ready for us to weave in. I'm going to go down and weave it into the red section, and I'm just going to do this on all of the colours. Simply cut a tail, pull it through, and that last slip stitch just secures that one in there, and it's all nice and seamed. Just need to weave it in. So all that's left to do is to weave these final 4 ends in, and then of course we're going to fill and stuff. Well, you need to make I'm going to show you how to make the top of our bauble. We're just going to place this on the top of our cushion. It's going to be stuffed so it'll be nice and firm, but it's going to look absolutely cute as anything when it's all completed. So grab your yellow and let's make the top of our baubles. For the top of our bauble, I'm using colour E, which is this gold yellow colour, and with my slip knot on my hook, we're going to be working in the round but along the beginning chain, or around the beginning chain. So we start by making a chain of 6. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. We're going to work into the second chain from hook by yarning over, ready to work 2 US half double crochets into that second chain from hook. A US half double crochet is the same as a UK half treble crochet. So I've yarned over the hook, inserting just underneath the top loop of my chain, yarn over to bring a loop up, yarn over, pull through all 3 loops. We're going to work a second stitch into that same chain. So yarn over, reinsert into that same chain, yarn over, bring a loop up, yarn over, pull through all 3 loops. We're then going to work 1 half double crochet into each of the next 3 chains. So we yarn over, insert into the next for number 1, yarn over, insert into the next again for number 2, yarn over and insert for number 3. Into this last chain here, we're going to be working 3 half double crochets. So we yarn over, insert, bring our loop up, pull through all 3. And I'm not going to worry about where this end is. I want to work over this knot, the original starting slip knot. And you can see I'm already turning my chain to be able to access that easier. What I don't want to do is to create a big hole. So I'm going to yarn over and insert. There's my end. So I'm going to just bring that back over my hook, bring my loop up, pull through all 3, rotate a little bit more to work that third and final stitch into that last chain again. And that brings us ready to work down the other side of our beginning chain. So if I pull it apart a little bit, you can see where it crosses over, and we're going to be placing 1 half double crochet into each of the next 3 stitches again. So we yarn over, we're inserting our hook directly opposite that first stitch. So I've inserted my hook, place my end over, yarn over, pull through all 3 loops. We're going to repeat that by yarning over, inserting opposite that stitch again, and working over my tail. So bring that loop back up, pull through all 3, and for a third time, find that tail, see where it crosses, insert my hook, bring the loop up, pull through all 3. That brings us back to our beginning chain, and in there we are just going to work 1 half double crochet because we previously worked 2 at the beginning of our round. So we're going to join our round into the top of that first stitch that we made just by inserting our hook, finding our yarn and not our tail, yarning over, pull through and straight through the loop on our hook. And that is round 1. At the end of round 1, you should have 12 half double crochets. From here, we're going to go straight into round 2 by making a chain of 1, and this chain 1 does not count as a stitch. We're going to yarn over, and into that same stitch as our chain 1, we're going to work 2 half double crochets. So we yarn over, insert into that same stitch, bring our loop up, yarn over, pull through all 3 loops, and then we yarn over, insert into the same stitch, ready to work a second half double crochet. We are then going to repeat this into the next stitch, working 2 half double crochets. So yarn over, insert for number 1, yarn over and reinsert into the same stitch for number 2. We're then going to work 1 half double crochet into each of the next 3 stitches. So that's 1, 2 and 3. We're then going to work 2 half double crochets into each of the next 3 stitches. So we yarn over for number 1, yarn over, reinsert for number 2. So that's once. Repeat that again into the next. So working 2 half double crochets into that next stitch. And then into that third stitch, we're working 2 half double crochets again. So that's 1 and 2. We're then going to work 1 half double crochet into each of the next 3 stitches. So that's number 1, 2 and 3. And we're going to end this round by working 2 half double crochets into that last stitch. So that's 1 and 2. So we're going to skip over our slip stitch and our chain 1, and we're joining into the top of that first stitch that we made to join round 2. And at the end of round 2 you should have a total stitch count of 18 half double crochets. We're then going to begin round 3 with our chain 1, and into the same stitch as our chain 1 we're going to start by working 2 half double crochets into the same stitch as our chain 1. So that's 1 and 2, and we're working 2 half double crochets into each of the next 3 stitches. So that's 1 and 2, 1 and 2, and then we finish for number 4 with 1 and 2. So we've increased into each of the first 4 stitches, and we then work 1 half double crochet into each of the next 5 stitches. So 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. We're then going to work 2 half double crochets into each of the next 4 stitches. So we're working 1, 2, 1 and 2 for the second time, 1 and 2 for the third time, and then for the fourth and final time we're working 2 half double crochets. As you can tell, the joy of scrap yarn is it's attacking me here. There we go. We're then going to work 1 half double crochet into each of the next 5 stitches. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5, which brings us to the end of our row, to the end of our round. So we have our slip stitch, chain 1, and we're joining to the top of that first stitch again. So we have not a circle, we have a lovely oval to kind of create the top of our bauble top, so to speak. So for round 4 we're going to work into the back loops only all the way around, and this will help us to create a side very neatly of the top of our bauble and create this to become a top. We start by making our chain of 1, and we're going to be working into the back loop only. It's easier to show you on the second stitch. So this is our front loop, that's our back loop. On the stitch where we've just slip stitched into, here's our front, there's our back. So we're going to be aiming our hook into the middle of the stitch, pushing out to the back. So yarn over ready, insert into the middle of your stitch to pick up that back loop, and work 1 half double crochet into each stitch around, working into the back loop only. So yarn over, aim for the middle of the stitch and push back to pick up that back loop, and we're doing that the whole way around. I didn't give you a stitch count because I'm naughty. So the stitch count at the end of round 3 was 26 half double crochets. So at the end of round 4 we're also going to have a stitch count of 26 half double crochets. It's just that this time we're working into the back loop only, and you can see that it's going to allow us to fold down very neatly by working into this loop only. So continue around working 1 half double crochet into each of the back loops, and I'll meet you for rounds 5 to 8. So if you get confused, do a quick count, because you should still have 26 half double crochets, and we're going to join to our first stitch that we made to maintain that stitch count of 26. It doesn't look very flat right now, but I promise you once it's stuffed We don't want it perfectly flat, we want it slightly curved like a real bauble cover, and it should be looking a little bit like that. So for rounds 5 to 8, so for 5, 6, 7 and 8, so for 4 more rounds we're going to be working our chain of 1 and then working 1 half double crochet into each stitch around, maintaining that stitch count of 26, and we're doing that for rows 5 through to 8, so it's a total of 4 rounds. And then we're going to move on to add a little bit of detail to the edge of our bauble tops. So continue to work rounds 5 to 8 and I'll meet you back for our final round. So at the end of round 8, you should be looking a little bit like this. And we are going to work one final round to add a little bit of detail. This is optional. You can, of course, just place it on as it is, but I like snazzy baubles and this one's already snazzy enough. But oh goodness, that's nice. So you can just stuff it and sew it on now if you want. I'm going to show you how to position it and sew it on, and it should look a little bit like that, but I think it needs a little bit more detail around the bottom. So for round 9, we are going to be working into the front loop only, and that means that with our right side facing, because we've got a tail on the inside, it means that these spikes around the bottom of our bauble cover are just going to be sitting in the right direction with the right side facing. So for round 9, we begin with our chain 1 and we're going to be working into the front loop only. We're going to work into the next one because this is a little bit tight, and for the front loop, remember we've got our back loop and our front loop. We come in under the front of our stitch to come out of the middle. So we're aiming to come out of the front loop only, and we're working a US single crochet, the same as a UK double crochet. So we just yarn over and pull through both loops. We're going to work into the same loop. This time we're yarning over, ready to work a half double crochet. We are then going to make a chain of 2, and we're doing a mini picot, so we slip stitch into the first chain that we made. So there's the chain, the second chain. We're inserting our hook back into that same chain and slip stitch, so pull through and straight through the loop on your hook. There's probably a nicer way of doing it, I'm not very good at them. And we're then going to work back into that same stitch again with a half double crochet, and then into the same stitch again we're working a single crochet, and that creates this beautiful little peak and a nice little pointy detail. We're then going to slip stitch across the next 2 stitches, so we insert our hook into the next, slip stitch, and do the same again into the next. And that gives us, when it's the right way up, a beautiful point around the bottom of our bauble. We're then going to work into the front loop only of the next stitch and repeat the single crochet, half double, etc. So we do another one together. So we insert from, I kind of go in from the bottom and aim to come out the middle of my stitch to work a single crochet just in that front loop only, yarn over to work a half double crochet. We then chain 2, slip stitch into that first chain that we made for a little mini picot moment, and then we're working a half double crochet into the same. I always yarn over again, but we just need to do a final single crochet, and then we're slip stitching across the next 2 stitches. That was 1 and 2, and now we have 2 beautiful peaks. We're going to repeat this around all the way back to where we started. So I'll do another one with you. We've done 2 slip stitches, we're working into the next stitch. So we start with our single crochet into that front loop only, we do a half double crochet, we chain 2, slip stitch into that first chain that we made, and then we're going to work back into the same stitch again with our half double crochet and then our single crochet. We then slip stitch across the next 2 stitches again. So that's 1 and 2. So continue to repeat this around. So we're working a single, half double, chain 2, slip stitch into the first chain that you made, followed by a half double crochet and finishing with a single crochet, and then of course we're slip stitching across the next 2. Work that all the way around and I'll meet you for our last few stitches. So once you've repeated that around and you've done your repeat, you should have just 1 stitch remaining, and we're going to work a final peek into this last stitch, of course into that front loop only. So a single crochet, half double crochet, chain 2, slip stitch into the first, half double crochet and single crochet. I'm just going to slip stitch to the first stitch that we actually skipped way back at the beginning of the round, and then I'm going to pull my yarn through, but I'm going to fasten off with a nice long tail. If I can find my scissors, because what we don't want is to forget we need to sew this on. So I'm just going to bring that through with my hook, and then we're going to stuff, I'm going to leave that end in there, I'm going to stuff the top of my bauble with some fibre fill. Not going too excessive, I want to make sure that I maintain the shape that I want. And you should have 9 of your peaks around the top of your bauble. Just make sure you're happy with how much you have in. Mine isn't overly filled because obviously we have to sit in the curve of our cushion. I'm not going to spin that too much because you might think I'm trying to hypnotize you. It doesn't really matter where you place your cover. I'm going to cover up one of my color changes. So I'm just going to plonk it on and make sure that I've got a peak in line with each of the edges. So before we go ahead and sew on the top of our bauble, I have an option for you. Now this was done by my tester and I wanted to share it with you because I thought it looked really cute. My original bauble did not have a top, which obviously meant it very difficult to hang. I don't have a macrame ring, so I'm going to use the inside of this embroidery hoop to create a hanging loop for my bauble. So I'm just going to take off the middle. This is entirely optional, you don't have to do this. And I'm going to cover it in the same yarn so that it looks like a hanging loop for the top of my bauble. If you want to do the same and you don't have a macrame ring or an embroidery hoop to use the middle of, you can grab anything that's circular. It can be the little top off of a milk bottle pot. It could be a hairband, whatever you've got to hand. Mine's quite large. If I had my way, it would be ever so slightly smaller. This is out of a 3-inch embroidery hoop, but needs must, and I want to get this finished. So I'm going to start just by tying on my yarn onto my hoop. Just going to double knot that so I can work over the end. And you're going to love how simple this is to do, because I'm just going to be holding my hoop, putting my hook through the middle, bringing it up and working a single crochet around it. Doesn't have to be particularly tight. And all I'm going to do is continually work around, going over my end as well, to completely cover this hoop. And I want my stitches sat on the top ideally. They can sit at the side if they need to, it's fine. We can move them around at the end. And we're literally single crocheting around our hoop, our milk bottle top, our macrame ring, our hairband, whatever you've got to hand to create this. So continue to work until you have completely filled You can opt to have your stitches on the inside or the outside. It's entirely up to you. They'll move around once you're finished. And I want to make sure they're all nice and even. So I probably will have them on the middle. I don't know, haven't decided. But continue around until you've filled this. Don't be scrimpy on this one. Don't let it space out too much so you can see the wood. And then I'm going to show you how we're going to attach this before we sew this onto the top of our cushion and make that finishing touch. So the final thing to do is, of course, to position the top of our bauble. I'm going to try and match up my points to where my seam is. Make sure that it's stretched out quite wide so that it doesn't pull in, because otherwise it looks a bit funny. So make sure you've got your middle coming down to the middle. And I'm going to secure these with stitch markers. If you're good at sewing amigurumi, you're going to find this a lot easier than I will. But I want to make sure that it's not dipping in, because then that changes the shape. And make sure that there we are, that's the shape we want. I'm going to grab my needle, thread it and get this sewn on. My aim is to make sure that I have this quite spread out across the width of my cushion, and then I'm going to work into the stitches and push through, just doing small stitches so that I can correct issues as I go. This is really awkward on camera. That's the shape I'm aiming for. I'm going to have to make sure that I stretch this, because otherwise that pops up. Then we can sew on our holder. I'll be back shortly once I've sewn this on. So once we have the top of our baubles nicely sewn on, all that's left to do is to sew on the top of our ring. As I said, this is completely optional, and I think this bauble looks really cute without a top. But if you want to get that full effect, then of course you just need to stitch on the top of your bauble. I'm just going to place the circle into the middle and whip stitch around it, which is of course impossible on camera. Just a few times. This is the worst needle, honestly. I need a new one. Just so that it's nice and tight and secure and not visible. Your beautiful bauble. I'm going to make sure mine is centered. I've not got enough yarn here. Once I've sewn on the center ring using my whip stitch, my bauble is going to be complete. Thank you as always for joining me for this tutorial. Don't forget to check out all of my free Christmas tutorials, which are over in my playlist, and I will see you in the next video.